Mike Tyson bites Holyfield's ear, 1997. There are moments in sports history that go beyond mere competition and become true symbols of madness. On June 28, 1997, at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, boxing witnessed one of those moments when Mike Tyson, a former champion trying to reclaim glory, bit Evander Holyfield's ear in front of the entire boxing world. This outrageous act shocked the public and is still described today as the most infamous act ever committed in a ring. To understand what unfolded that night, one must go back a few months earlier. In November 1996, Tyson and Holyfield had already faced each other in a fight that Holyfield won by TKO in the 11th round. It was a total shock to observers because Tyson was at the top of his game, and nobody expected him to fail that night. Naturally, the second fight carried even greater anticipation and media hype, but tension rose for all the wrong reasons from the opening rounds. Holyfield used his head and body to get inside Tyson's guard, and several headbutts seemed to strike the former champion's face. Frustrated and convinced the referee was not protecting his interests, Tyson began to lose his composure. In the third round, the unthinkable happened. In a clinch, Tyson turned his head slightly and sank his teeth into Holyfield's right ear, tearing off a piece of cartilage. Holyfield screamed and jumped in pain while the referee briefly stopped the action. But the story did not end there. Moments later, Tyson repeated the act despite a warning and bit his opponent again. This time, the referee had no choice but to disqualify Tyson, ending one of the most shocking fights of all time. Images of Holyfield shaking his bloodied head, Tyson protesting furiously, and the panicked crowd surrounding the ring immediately became iconic. Following this global scandal, Tyson was suspended and lost his license for over a year and was fined $3 million, a record penalty at the time. In hindsight, the episode goes beyond a simple sporting matter as it revealed the immense pressure weighing on Tyson. Antonio Margarito's Loaded Raps, 2009. In January 2009, boxing faced one of its most alarming scandals when Antonio Margarito was set to face Shane Mosley at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Moments before the fight, Mosley's team noticed an anomaly in Margarito's hand wraps. A commission inspector demanded to check them, and what he found froze the arena. Inside the wraps was a hard substance resembling plaster, suggesting that Margarito's camp intended to use tampered hand wraps capable of turning a boxer's fists into lethal weapons. This discovery was far from trivial because Margarito had just delivered impressive performances, including a brutal win over Miguel Cotto the previous year. That night, Cotto had been destroyed under a storm of punches, collapsing with his face covered in blood. After the illegal wraps were revealed, fans began to question whether Margarito had used the same method against him. This suspicion turned a sporting defeat into a potential crime and cast a shadow over the Mexican fighter's career. The fight against Mosley went ahead, but Margarito appeared drained. Mosley demolished him round after round until the referee stopped the fight in the 9th. Only weeks later, the truth came out. Margarito and his trainer, Javier Capetillo, were each suspended for 1 year by the California Commission. Using hardened wraps was tantamount to endangering an opponent's life and represented a shocking betrayal of the unspoken code uniting boxers. Since then, the word rap has become synonymous with cheating in the boxing world, and every mention of Margarito recalls the affair. Cotto's fans were ecstatic for the rematch in 2011, which was not just a sporting revenge, but a quest for justice. Cotto dominated Margarito, and the scandal found a form of closure, yet the damage was done. Margarito's image remains forever linked to that scandal, and even in retirement, the shadow of the Loaded Raps followed him. Luis Resto and Panama. Lewis glove scandal, 1983. On June 16, 1983, at Madison Square Garden, a boxing match descended into horror. The fight involved 21-year-old undefeated prospect Billy Collins Jr. and veteran Luis Resto. Collins entered the ring invincible and destined for a bright future, but that night he absorbed abnormally destructive blows. His face swelled and his brow split as he endured punishment nobody could understand. At the end of 10 rounds, his father and trainer Billy Collins Sr. approached to shake Resto's hand and noticed the gloves felt unusually hard. He immediately realized something was wrong. Officials inspected the gloves and discovered that some padding had been replaced with plaster, which hardened the blows and caused catastrophic damage to Collins' face. The consequences were devastating, and Collins suffered severe eye injuries, ending his career before it even began. Less than a year later, he died in a car accident, which many still consider a disguised suicide after a life shattered by that night. The case became one of the biggest criminal scandals in modern boxing. Often involved in wrongdoing, Panama Lewis, Resto's trainer, was identified as the mastermind behind the glove tampering. Lewis and Resto were both convicted of assault and criminal conspiracy and sentenced to prison, as well as receiving lifetime bans from boxing. Resto admitted years later that not only had the padding been removed, but a substance on the wraps had also made his punches more painful, confirming that the cheating had been total. Yet the legacy of that night remains a raw wound. Collins is remembered as the talent sacrificed by corruption and maliciousness, while Resto lived in shame, unable to escape the shadow of that crime. Canelo Alvarez PED suspension, 2018. In 2018, the biggest star of modern boxing found himself at the center of a scandal that shook the entire sport. Canelo Alvarez, undefeated since his loss to Floyd Mayweather, had become the face of world boxing. But just months before his highly anticipated fight against Gennady Golovkin, everything erupted. In February 2018, he underwent 2 anti-doping tests revealing clenbuterol, a banned substance used as a fat burner and sometimes to improve endurance. This shocking news stunned the boxing world, especially given the financial and media weight Canelo carried in the sport at the time. As expected, Canelo vehemently denied cheating, claiming the clenbuterol came from contaminated meat consumed in Mexico, a documented health issue in the country. Yet for fans and purists, the explanation remained hard to accept. The Nevada Athletic Commission acted swiftly, suspending Canelo for 6 months, which effectively delayed the rematch with Golovkin scheduled for May. Some accused him of deliberate doping, while others defended the idea of a food accident. Golovkin added fuel to the fire, insinuating that Canelo had already cheated in their controversial 2017 fight that ended in a disputed draw. Tensions rose and the rivalry became almost personal. The scandal made the rematch an electrifying event. In September 2018, the fight finally took place. Canelo won on points after 12 tight rounds, partially reclaiming control of his image. Yet the doping stain remained. The scandal had a massive impact on the perception of the sport, showing that even the most powerful figures are not immune, and that public trust can be shattered instantly. It also sparked debate on the adequacy of sanctions, as some felt 6 months was too little for a star of his caliber. Even today, every major victory of Canelo is accompanied by voices recalling this controversy. Phantom Punch: Ali vs. Liston II, 1965. In May 1965, the boxing world gathered in Lewiston, Maine, for the rematch between Muhammad Ali and Sonny Liston. The first fight had already been a shock because Ali had dethroned the feared champion. The rematch was supposed to be Liston's chance for redemption, but it entered history for a very different reason. As the fight barely reached the first round, Ali delivered a short right hook that barely touched Liston, who collapsed in front of a stunned crowd. Many in the arena did not even see the punch because it was so subtle and fast. Liston fell on his back and then clumsily tried to rise, while referee Nat Fleischer hesitated to start the count. Ali hovered above his opponent, shouting insults and ordering him to get up. The confusion lasted several seconds before the fight was finally stopped and declared a KO victory for Ali. What could have been a moment of total glory for Ali immediately became a subject of controversy. Spectators spoke of the Phantom Punch because the hook seemed too weak to bring down a colossus like Liston. Even the television cameras provided no clarity because some angles showed clear contact while others suggested Liston had thrown himself down. Soon, the theory of a dive gained momentum. Many accused Liston of deliberately losing either out of fear of Ali or due to mafia pressure. Rumors suggested Liston was indebted to organized crime, and losing was an easy way to settle scores. For Ali, the punch had the necessary power, and Liston simply could not withstand it. But this defense did not convince everyone, and the fight remains forever associated with the idea of a fixed match. Muhammad Ali was seen as a cheater, and Liston as a puppet in the hands of the mafia. Even today, many continue to analyze the Phantom Punch, trying to find a plausible explanation for what happened that night. Was it a real KO or a voluntary fall? No one holds the absolute truth, and it is this mystery that fuels the legend. In that main ring, it was not just a hook that made history, but an eternal controversy, a scene embodying both the magic and suspicion that have always accompanied boxing. Pacquiao versus Bradley Thurster Frein, 2012, robbery. This fight took place on June 9, 2012 in Las Vegas and represented a top-level duel between Manny Pacquiao, the reigning world champion whose aura had dominated for over a decade, and Timothy Bradley, a disciplined and serious challenger with a precise style. From the start, Pacquiao imposed his speed and accuracy, bombarding Bradley with clean combinations. Bradley tried to respond courageously, but often retreated and endured the power of his opponent, and it was clear he would soon falter as his legs wobbled. The crowd witnessed a one-sided contest dominated by Pacquiao, whose victory seemed certain long before the final bell. Then came the verdict. The first judge scored Pacquiao the winner, 115-113, but the second judge announced 115-113 for Bradley. The third judge also scored 115-113 for the American. It was a bombshell. The arena erupted in boos and disbelief because no one had seen Bradley as the winner based on the fight. Controversy erupted immediately, and observers spoke of one of the worst robberies in sports history. Statistics confirmed what everyone saw, and the American media went into a frenzy, mentioning a possible conspiracy by their shared promoter, Bob Arum, to provoke a lucrative rematch. Even Bradley later admitted he kept his own scorecard and was not sure of victory when he heard the official decision. Long count. Dempsey versus Tunney, 1927. On September 22, 1927 in Chicago, former heavyweight king Jack Dempsey attempted to regain his title against Gene Tunney, who had beaten him the previous year. Soldier Field was filled with over 100,000 spectators, witnessing an explosive rematch. Dempsey was no longer at the peak of his career, but still carried an aura of terror, while Tunney embodied the modern, intelligent, methodical, and disciplined boxer. During the early rounds, Tunney imposed his style and prevented Dempsey from settling. But in the 7th round, legend came alive as Dempsey sent a furious combination exploding on Tunney's head, sending him to the canvas. The stadium went wild awaiting the Mauler's comeback. Yet when Tunney fell, Dempsey did not immediately go to a neutral corner as required by a new rule introduced shortly before, and that would cost him the victory. Tunney lay on the floor staring at the sky, but as the referee reasoned with Dempsey, precious extra seconds passed before the count officially began. According to witnesses, Tunney had nearly 14 seconds to recover, where a normal 10 count would have condemned him. When the referee reached 9, Tunney calmly rose and resumed the fight. He survived the storm and regained control in the following rounds to win a unanimous decision and retain his title. This is what became known as the famous long count. For Dempsey's fans, it was a blatant injustice and a title stolen due to a clumsy rule application. For Tunney's supporters, everything was legal because he merely followed the rules, rising before the end of the count and mastering the rest of the fight. The controversy has fueled debates for almost a century and remains engraved in collective memory. Boxing and the mob, 1950s to 60s. In post-war America, boxing was at its peak, but it was not only a sporting spectacle. Behind the spotlights and the glowing rings, huge shadows controlled the backstage. The 1950s and 1960s saw the mob infiltrate boxing deeply. The mafia did not only control the fights, but also the future of fighters who became puppets in a locked system. The mob decided who climbed into the ring and who stayed in the dark, and often the money from illegal betting weighed more than the belts. This corruption behind the curtains was shocking because it showed that even at the highest level, the sweet science was not guided by glory, but by the orders of organized crime. Names like Frankie Carbo and Blinky Palermo became infamous for their power to decide the fate of men in the ring. Frankie Carbo, known as the invisible godfather of boxing, held such vast influence that he could ruin a career with a single call. Fighters, often ignorant or powerless, faced limited choices and sometimes contended with opponents who were favored or weakened, depending on mafia financial interests. Promoters and managers who refused to cooperate suffered economic and physical pressure, turning this wonderful sport known as the noble art into a power game where punches sometimes mattered only for show, titles were sold, and records manipulated, while young prospects' hopes were shattered by fear and corruption. The scandal even touched world championship matches. Persistent rumors suggested that some famous results were never natural, but dictated by orders from Chicago or New York. Fans paying to see a hero's victory often did not know that the outcome had been written before the first round. These practices cast a shadow over the sport's history and fed the myth that boxing is an arena where law and fairness are secondary to mafia power. Despite FBI investigations and contemporary press inquiries, many secrets remained buried. Former boxers' testimonies reveal pervasive fear and the impossibility of reaching the top without permissions or bribes. Corruption turned boxing into a theater of manipulation, where money and crime dictated glory. True champions had to navigate talent and moral compromise, and those who refused ended up isolated and forgotten. The impact of this era was profound. It left scars on the sport's credibility and strengthened fan mistrust. Its only advantage today is that it laid the foundations for future reforms in fight regulation and boxer protection.